What is going on, everybody? It is me again. It's HorrorFan34, and welcome to another video, and welcome to another review for the 31 Days of Horror Challenge in October. So continuing on with the marathon of reviews for the month of Halloween. And I figured I would talk about this one next, going back into the 80s. Which I remember, what review did I do previously? Mosquito, because it was in the 90s. So now I'm fast forwarding backwards to the 80s again. And I figured, well, should I review this one for the Horrorthon? I figured, why the hell not? Because it is labeled as a horror slasher movie. And, you know, when I think about underrated 80s movies of all time, I always was like one of the top ones I always think of. And, you know, it's not like a gory movie for a slasher film, but it's definitely more of a thriller when it comes to slashers. And if you can tell by the title of the video, that review is going to be on Silent Rage. Science created him. Now Chuck Norris must destroy him. But yeah, Silent Rage came out in 1982. Of course, stars Chuck Norris as Sheriff Stevens. Now, first off, getting on to Chuck Norris, I'm a huge fan of Chuck Norris as an action star. Always been a big fan of Chuck Norris's movies. My personal favorite is The Hero and the Terror, but I also really enjoyed like this film, Firewalker, Invasion USA, Lone Wolf McQuade, the Missing in Action movies, the Delta Force, Code of Silence, always the Octagon, Force Vengeance, Hellbound. I'm a huge fan of Chuck Norris as an action star, and this is definitely one of my favorites of his. And now the story with the film is that it deals with this serial killer, Jack Kirby, played by Brian Libby. Now, if you don't know who Brian Libby is, that's the guy who was in The Shawshank Redemption. He was Floyd, one of Morgan Freeman's friends. He was also in The Green Mile. He played the sheriff that found the bodies of the two little girls. In The Green Mile, he was the sheriff. That's Brian Libby. In the very beginning of the film, you see him kill two of his family members with this family that he's staying with. Kills them with this axe. You don't see it, though. It's kind of implied that happens. And Chuck Norris and his partner get to the scene of the crime, and his partner is actually Stephen Furst, who is Flounder from Animal House, who will later be in the Dream Team with Michael Keaton. May he rest in peace. Stephen Furst, a very solid character actor. But they get to the scene of the crime. They shoot and wound Brian Libby really badly, and then his body gets transferred to this hospital where they're doing this genetic experiment on him. These three doctors are, and the three doctors, you have one who's Ron Silver, who would later be the bad guy in Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's been in a lot of other stuff too, Ron Silver, just look him up. May he rest in peace. You also have William Finley as one of the other doctors who was in The Phantom of the Paradise. And the other doctor is, I think, Stephen Keats. Now, if you don't know who Stephen Keats is, if you remember the original Death Wish, Paul Kersey, Charles Bronson's character, the guy that played Charles Bronson's son-in-law in the original Death Wish, that's Stephen Keats. He's the other doctor in this. And they're all performing this experiment on Jack Kirby, and it goes horribly wrong, and this genetic experiment gives him superhuman strength pretty much. And basically, you can't hurt him, and every time he does get hurt, like, he heals very quickly. So then basically Chuck Norris has to take down this guy, pretty much. And that's the entire premise of the film. Now, what I love about Silent Rage is, like, even though it's not a gory movie at all, it's not a gory film, but even with slasher films not being gory, there are slashers out there that are very successful, at least to me, when it doesn't come to gore. Like the original April Fool's Day, for example. That's not a gory film, but that is labeled a slasher film. But that does it really, really well. Same thing with this one. Now, there's two main things I love about this film. First off is Chuck Norris as the hero, Chuck Norris really gets a chance to shine in this film. Has a lot of really great scenes where he's kicking ass. There's even a point where he does like that high jump kick, and like especially like this scene here, and has this fight where he fights these guys with his pool cue stick, and he hits one guy in the face. And the final showdown between him and the killer is great. So Chuck Norris is definitely a highlight of the film. And another highlight of the film is the musical score. I don't remember who did the musical score to this film, but the musical score to this film is so well done. It is eerie, it is creepy, especially like the opening sequence where you see like this church window, and like the music is really creepy, very eerie, and things like that, and it's just extremely unsettling, and it kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies in a way. I mean, and of course, like with the killer, there's all these like different POV shots, sort of like in the vein of the original Halloween, and it's done so well because like you have that creepy musical score in those scenes, and there's even a point where the killer Jack Kirby is stalking one of the doctors, Ron Silver, and you have that POV shot of the killer walking, and things like that. It's very creepy stuff. And what really sells the scenes is the musical score. If you listen to the musical score in this film, it is absolutely just mesmerizing and just absolutely terrifying and eerie. So that's like the two main things that really stick out about this film for me is Chuck Norris and the musical score. And the other cast members do a good job as well. And another really great scene with Chuck Norris is when he gets to knock this guy off a motorcycle and things like that. And I really thought Brian Libby as the killer did a great job. You can kind of see him there, right there. Yeah, I thought Brian Kirby did a really good job, especially in the very beginning when he's like, Doc, he's on the phone, he's like, Doc, I think I'm losing it. And you can kind of tell, like, in that scene, you can see, like, the sanity in him kind of leave his body in a way, and he kind of becomes insane. And the character of Jack Kirby, Brian Libby really sells that. And another thing, too, I really like about this film is that even when it's not showing the killer, it focuses on Chuck Norris just kicking ass, and I'm always up for that for Chuck Norris. And it was just cool to see other people in here for actors-wise, like Ron Silver, Stephen Keats, William Finley. And this was pretty much Chuck Norris's first big picture movie, because before this, like when he worked on things like The Octagon and things like that those were more like lower budgeted like production companies. And this was really Chuck Norris's first big studio movie, because this was, at the time, Columbia Pictures. And then eventually he would move on to MGM with Force of Vengeance, and then after that he would be in Cannon Films like Invasion USA and Firewalker. Like, those were all Cannon Films, and that was really Chuck Norris's big breakout, was Cannon Films, with all those films that he was doing in the 80s, in like the mid to late 80s. So you can kind of say this was the start of Chuck Norris's jump start into like big picture studios, pretty much. And it was a great one to start out with. And it was just cool to see Chuck Norris in such a film that deals with a Michael Myers sort of killer. It's sort of like if you put Chuck Norris in Halloween 2, pretty much, the original Halloween 2. There's even a sequence where it takes place in a hospital, which is really cool, sort of in the vein of Halloween 2. And overall, I mean, if you want to see Chuck Norris sort of like in a horror movie, this is one of the 3 horror films he got to do, other than like Hellbound and Hero and the Terror. But this is definitely more of the full-fledged horror film than those ones are, because Hero and the Terror has horror elements in it, but it's definitely more of a thriller. Hellbound is sort of like an action film horror with the devil, pretty much, with this demon. This is like a full-fledged, like, serious slasher thriller horror movie. And it's a great one. It's a great one if you like Chuck Norris. So that's pretty much it for my review for Silent Rage. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.